How slow is the worst setup on F1 2019? Well, to find out, I've taken to the Spa circuit then. I'm in a Ferrari. I'm in time trial mode to isolate as many variables as possible. So there's no tyre temperatures, there's no engine temperatures, there's no tyre wear, there's no ERS deployment. A lot of that's isolated out. So it's really just about what car you're in and then how quick you're driving and of course the setup you're using. So this is a run that I did with completely standard setup. So this is the just whatever it gives you right in the middle. It's, jump in the game, don't change the setup at all. This is exactly what you get. So this is kind of my base run, if you like. This is what we're going to base our worst setups from. I'm going to try a few different setups. I'm going to try a stiff one, a soft one, someone that's opposite to top time trial, and then we are going to try the top time trial setup as well at the end, just for a bit of balance. So quite excited for this video, I'm not going to lie, because I'm the sort of person that doesn't tend to do many setups. I prefer to keep them completely standard, just partly because it's just easier, but also because I like to have my content that's quite sort of relatable for my viewers, if you like. So they don't just think, oh, I'm driving just because I'm using a fancy setup. I am just using completely standard, which anyone and everyone can do. So here we go then. You can see in the top right, I'm just about 2/10 up on my previous lap. So that was just an earlier standard setup lap. I'm just trying to beat that, and I didn't spend too long in this. The idea isn't to get perfect laps every single time. The idea really is to just get a solid enough lap that's quite representative, and and I think I'm reasonably sort of somewhat fast normally. I'm sort of normally maybe top 5% or so of players, so I should be able to be consistent enough to make this a fair enough test, hopefully. That is the plan, and as I said, I did do a couple of laps on each just to make sure that I was doing as fair a test as possible. So coming towards the end of the lap now, we are still around about 2/10 up on our previous then. Getting to the line, 2.3 tenths-ish up on our previous then. So that puts us 1039th on the leaderboard overall. So that is our target time. So this is our stiff/responsive setup then. So you can see me running no front wing, but really high wing, maximum rear wing, maximum rear drag. Completely full differential. That should stop the car rotating in corners. It'd be very frustrating to drive, make it understeery. Full right camber, full left toe. I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's what my logic told me it was, but that is what a lot of the top guys run as well, so maybe not. Full everything on the suspension tab. That's just to make it all as stiff as possible, and the ride height is as high as possible to make as much drag as possible. Brakes, we're leaving standard. We're going to do that throughout the whole time because we don't want that as a variable, and tyres, we're going to run absolutely full pressure. Then just go back to the brakes briefly. So I decided that I was going to run completely the same brakes all the time, because brakes are a bit of a weird one to change. It's quite preferential, and it doesn't really affect, there's just an optimum and there's a worst, and all I would have done would reduce the brake pressure hugely and make it hugely front tyre locking. So speaking of which, by the way, I noticed after my default setup run that I was running ABS. I have got absolutely no idea why ABS is on, but it was, so I decided to just keep it on for the whole time, just to roll with it. But it will, of course, be turned off for future videos. I don't know how long that's been on for, actually. I don't know why it's on, but anyway, it will be switched off. So already then, towards the end of the first set, you see me already losing quite a bit of time in this straight line. We have actually got less front wing, we've got much higher rear wing, and just having a much higher ride height has enabled us to lose a little bit of time. Bit of a corner cut there, but we're not going to worry too much about that. And already about half a second down. They didn't lose an excessive amount in the first sector, but what we've done here, as I mentioned, is made it really stiff and really sort of responsive. Really, a stiff car is a responsive car. Struggling there for oversteer. The stiff car doesn't like curbs, and the idea of this, there probably isn't a lot of grip because the car's just too stiff. It's not allowing the car to roll into the outside tyres and to let the outside tyre really grip into the track. It's just sort of scrubbing along the track instead. But it is really responsive, so it will turn in really nicely, but it just won't grip once it gets there. That's the sort of idea of this setup. And you see that I'm already 1.2 down, so it clearly has made quite a significant difference. And I will say the biggest things in setup, I'm by no means a setup expert. I'm expecting lots of comments down below saying I did this wrong and I did that wrong. By no means an expert. I just did a bit of research to make this video. But the wings really make a big difference in terms of sort of feel of the car, in terms of grip of the car, really. So if you run really high wings, you get really loads of grip, but you suffer a lot in a straight line. So they're nice and easy to set up. And then I ran diff, high diff on most of them, because the diff really allows the car to rotate in the corner. So if you run completely locked diff, the car just refuses to rotate. so that's quite frustrating to drive. But anyway, there's my lap time. That is 1.4 seconds down on my base time. Slower in every single sector, but middle sector was by far the worst. I was about 7/10 slower in the middle sector. So that is that. So now we're going to run the soft/grippy setup then. So we're in the same way angles. We're going to run nothing on the front, really hard on the rear just to get as much drag as possible. Again, full locked diff just to stop the car from rotating. Going to run full right everything on camber and toe. Again, I'm not 100% on this particular setting, but that is what I went with. And suspension, then we are going to run absolutely one soft as possible on everything. But again, we are leaving the ride height full because that makes the car as draggy as possible. And Spa, of course, is a very much straight line speed dominated circuit. Same brakes as the first setup and as soft as possible on the tyre pressures. Now, just going back briefly then to what I mentioned about drag, of course, part of the reason I chose Spa was because it's very much, it's not quite as extreme as Monza because it's got a few more corners than that, but it is a very much, low downforce track where you want a lot of speed in a straight line, but there is also a lot of corners, but most of them are high-speed corners, medium to high-speed corners, so there isn't many of these sort of slower corners because to try and do a bad setup for a track that sort of does a bit of everything would be very hard, so that's why I opted for Spa. So having a reasonable first turn there actually, and for some reason I'm faster in a straight line, and I never quite figured that out. You see in the top right there, my delta, I just actually gaining it. So I've somehow made myself faster in a straight line, and I don't really know why, to be honest. Let me know down in the comments if you know the changes, why the changes I made a difference. It should be slower because I'm running softer tyre pressures, which will make them a bit more draggy. I've not changed the ride height. I've got softer suspension, softer anti-roll bars. That shouldn't really make a difference in a straight line. I guess I changed the camber. Maybe that would make it, or toe rather. I changed the toe. I guess that would make a difference. That must be what is making a difference. I think I've just worked out live during commentary. But again, let me know in the comments if you know for sure. Now, just going back to this lap, then you see us just. I thought the turning would be a lot worse and that it would be really, really lazy car to turn in, but actually it's not that much different. It's a little bit lazier, and I thought it would be grippier mid-corner, but actually that's not what's turning out to be. I just can't seem to get it through these corners, and a lot of the corners at Spa are sort of 90-degree corners. There isn't many really long ones. So you see they're just struggling hugely with understeer, and this surprised me a little bit. I thought having a really soft car would just make it so lazy and just really, really reluctant to turn in. But we are definitely slowing. See, we're about 1.7 down on our previous lap, although gaining, of course, in the straight line, we think because of our toe. Coming now, I should be a bit quicker through here. Nice soft suspension, but again, it's just reluctant to turn in, isn't it? Nice soft suspension should help you in the slower speed corners, and I was reasonable there. I think I actually potentially went faster. Well, not quite. I did go faster in the first sector than my previous lap time, and there we go, confirmation. We are 1.6 seconds back or so on that one, and very slightly quicker in the first sector, significantly slower in the second sector, about 7/10, and then quite similar really in the final sector. Actually, sorry, it's it's over a second in the middle sector, wasn't it? I completely misread that. Anyway, then this is the setup then for the opposite of the top time trial setup. So what I've done here is I've copied a top time trial setup and I made everything opposite. So they run full right camber, full left toe. I've done the opposite of that. Suspension, they run pretty low on most suspension, but pretty high on the rear anti-roll bar. So I've done opposite of that. Brakes, again, I have kept completely standard because I didn't want to make that a variable. And tire pressures, they tend to run quite high tire pressures, so I've run quite low tire pressures, which actually you probably will have noticed isn't that dissimilar to my quite soft setup, which probably explains why I was so slow on that particular lap. Anyway, then this is the lap. So this is, I think I did 2 or 3 laps or so practice on this. That's all I did for all of them though, 2 or 3 laps practice or so. But anyway, coming across the line now, I can see us quite a bit slower in a straight line. That's just because we're running such high wings. We've got high ride height. Although we have got a little bit better toe, so the toe will be helping us very slightly. We could have made the car even draggier, but anyway, this is what we're doing, and we're already quite significantly down then on our sort of sample time. I couldn't find the right word. The control time, if you like. That's probably the best word for it. The control variable. And actually over 6/10 down in the first sector alone. 7/10 down as we come to the end of the first sector. In the first sector alone, that's huge. Considering the last setup, we actually in the first sector we actually beat our previous ever so slightly. So really quite significantly different. But actually in the middle sector here, it feels a little bit better. It feels a bit more positive. It's not quite so lazy, which was a bit of a surprise. I thought, running completely opposite to what the fastest guys are running, you would expect it to be an absolute shocker of a car. But it really isn't too bad. And my sort of summary from this video really is that the variables in F1 aren't too extreme. the settings that you change, my understanding is that they are different for each track. So a full downforce setup won't be the same at Spa as it is at Monaco. So the variables that you're allowed to choose from are a little bit restrictive, which is why I can't make the car absolutely horrible. I did also, it's not in this video, but I did try and make a really, really horribly oversteery car just to see how bad I could make it. And actually, because you don't get ballast in this game like you did last game, it's really hard. I couldn't make a car that was horribly oversteery. It wasn't fantastic, but also it wasn't, you know, drifting everywhere. And this is with, you know, full downforce on the front and low downforce on the rear, and I just couldn't do it. So I think, you know, the game does restrict your variables a little bit in terms of what you can do. 1.6 seconds down at the line then, which is very slightly better than the previous lap, because we were 1.7 down in the previous lap more or less, and we're 1.6 down now. So, but actually we were significantly faster in the middle sector during that one. We just lost all the time in the first and final sector just because we were dragging so much. Now this will be the very top time trial setup. Then I just sort of wanted to do this after driving those horrible setups. I really wanted to do a test on the best setup, or you know, you'd assume it's the best setup, the top time trial setup. So you're looking at it now. I won't really explain it too much as I didn't create it, so I had, you know, limited knowledge really on it. But we've got much more open differential, which will help us hugely rotate the car. Which yeah, and you see this is now the opposite of the previous setup we ran, of course. And brakes, I did actually let the brakes change on this. I just ran it completely as it was, a top tram style setup. Just to, this was more for fun. You know, this video is about finding the worst setup, and this video really was, or this setup rather, was just for fun, just because I wanted to just see how significantly different it was. So our previous best is 1.7 down on our previous lap, and I suspect we'll be able to improve our control lap with this setup, but we will see. So already getting quite significantly just for the short run to the first turn, then getting it all slowed down, hit my apex nicely, trying to get on the power nice and smooth, which managed to do pretty nicely. And we are up already on our previous lap, then I'm expecting that'll stay throughout the whole lap, and I'm wondering how much we'll be able to gain on our standard setup time. And quite a bit up. Oh wow, 2 tenths up already just after Eau Rouge there. DRS open almost 3 tenths, so really gaining an awful lot of time just in the straight line alone. 3.5 tenths at the end of the first sector, then that is quite significant already. Coming through the middle section now, then just trying to thread it through. And again, I didn't sweat too much with these. This was probably a 2 or 3 or 4 lap run, I think it was. Actually, I think it might have been a 4 lap run or so from memory. So you know, not a perfect setup by any means, not a perfect lap rather by any means. But again, that isn't the point in this video. I didn't want to sweat for an hour on each setup. That's a bit too much. I think it's quite a fair test if I kind of do a couple of laps on each. That should be pretty fair. But we've actually lost time then so far in the middle sector. I don't know if that's down to just not getting quite so good a lap, or perhaps it's a lower downforce setup. Well, it definitely is a lower downforce setup than the standard setup. So compromising the middle sector a little bit with respect to that. So you can see there we are. Well, it's got a green sector, but that is worse than the best sector that we've done in the middle sector. But this is where we start to gain again. You see the delta just going up hugely there. Gaining huge amounts in the final sector. And all we're doing is keeping the throttle flat and threading it through the full speed corners. And we're over 4 tenths up then as we come into the final chicane. Getting it through here nice and tidily, hopefully, which we managed to do quite nicely. Pretty good. We're going to end up 4.5 tenths, almost 5 tenths. Almost half a second up then on our previous best time with a standard setup, and that puts us 349th in the world then, which and there you go, that's confirmation of the sector times then. So of course we don't get a comparison, unfortunately. A little bit annoying with this game that we don't get a comparison to our previous sector times, but we know that we're a bit worse in the middle sector but quite significantly better in the first and third sectors. And let's have a look at the leaderboards then. So obviously I was in the Ferrari, which is not the fastest car, so I ended up about 8 tenths off the best Ferrari, which I've got highlighted there. So that's not too bad. And I think he himself was about 8 tenths off the best Mercedes. So just because we can, we had a little look at the leaderboards there. And here we go then. This is the comparison of all 5 laps to find out what is the worst setup. And in my experience, actually the soft setup was the worst, which surprised me a little bit. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I thought that stiff setup would be the worst, just because it would turn in beautifully but then just have no grip when it actually did. But actually, soft as possible is the worst setup in F1 2019, even worse than doing completely the opposite of what the top time trial guys are doing, but of course not excessively worse. It was only well, a couple of hundredths, wasn't it? And also the top time trial setup is about half a second quicker than the standard setup, which sounds about right. And of course that's just the top time trial setup. I'm sure sure a lot of the F1 esports guys use very secretive setups that we are not allowed to see. But anyway then, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I thank you for watching. Bye bye.